Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're going to do a quick video looking at something interesting that was pointed out by Sith on the TEC Hub Discord. Before we get into it, I do want to mention that Matrix has actually made a video detailing all of the ways to get the week's decals, and I believe he's going to be making these videos going forward. If you don't know who Matrix is, he's one of the moderators at the TEC Hub, and he runs a lot of stuff over there, and generally his videos for me are very interesting to watch, so I'm going to leave a link to it in a pinned comment so you yourself can have a look. So, what am I talking about in War Thunder? Well, we've had the American Desert map, which has its own train on it. We have a bunch of new aerialistic maps which look like they have train tracks on them. How about we have a look at what I would deem a secret train which has been found by Sith, as I said. So the way you access this train is kind of interesting. The first way, or the only real way that I've found doing it, is you have to go into a test drive for Soviet vehicles of a low BR. Now the reason why you have to do this is because at a higher BR, what you find is you actually have a different airfield compared to the lower Soviet BR. So the lower Soviet BR is around Krasny Oktyabr, I believe it is, basically just off Stalingrad, to the north of Stalingrad. And as you can see, I'm using the premium Hurricane, but you can use anything like the I-16 or anything like that. And if you go to any other test drive, what you will find is a bunch of green markers around the airfield. You'll probably find one red dot for you, since I've changed the colors over here. But what you won't have is one of those. Now what is that? Well, of course, the title of the video has kind of given it away. It is, in fact, a train. And with this train comes a lot of possibilities. As I said before, the American Desert map has given us an interesting point of view when it comes to trains. You can use them tactically in ground forces, you can even use them tactically in air forces. By taking it out at certain positions, you can make it stop and therefore use it for cover. You can also now, it actually has a damage model. It has an engine modeled in it. It has all of these interesting little tidbits modeled in the actual train itself. When it comes to the carriages are not modeled with a damage model, but you can still use them for cover. This one is definitely a little bit more, let's call it low resolution. If you have a look at the wheels on the machine, if we can get close, let's try and do a low flyby. You can see that it looks like they're not exactly connected to the bottom, but from a distance like this, just to remember we're on max graphics right now, it is kind of hard to see the difference. All you see is a really interesting smoke cloud. Now this thing is obviously carrying cargo, probably not passengers, and that means it is, or at least seems to be, a cargo train, and it has for itself a railway which it can follow along. Now as you can see, the low-res nature of the train obviously means that either the model itself has been in-game for a long time, or it's just a reused model. But what is nice about this and some other test drives is they all have a little bit of a gimmick. The British one has a few cargo ships lying about. This one, the low tier one, has this train running about. And what makes me excited, or what makes me look to the future when it comes to these things, is we've talked about a lot of the time in aerialistic and enduring confrontation, what can we add to these game modes to make them even more interesting? And the best thing is more objectives. Now, as I have been, over the last half a year, I've advocated for paratroopers, I've advocated for more AI to basically make it feel like you are in a war setting, so you have AI around players instead of just around the place. Make you feel like you are part of the battle instead of you being the battle. I've also advocated for trains, especially on some of these new aerialistic maps, such as the one which is around Lake Ladoga, since there is an actual train track which follows the whole western side of the map there. I've also advocated for other things, such as terrain differences, certain areas of maps which could work very well, certain Japanese islands, Operation Dragoon, things like this, which to me are the new step or a next step at least in the generation of Air Realistic. But over the last few months, instead of just focusing on ground units as well, I've also been thinking about the idea of adding more AI air targets. And the reason for this is because if you just add in a bunch of ground units, then you're going to keep dragging the meta so everybody is near the ground, especially if you add in soft targets like this train. And the reason why I'm waiting is to just show you that this train can actually go over bridges. Yes, it is a little bit wonky at the start and the end of the bridge, but it does get there. It is able to do it. But yeah, I've thought of the idea of having stuff like aircraft or air AI in some aspects, maybe even, paratrooper AI. So the battle is not always forced to the ground with more ground AI, because that is a problem, attackers, bombers, everything like that are more focused on the ground instead of focused on the air, so that drags everything else down, and it means that at higher tiers, at rank 4, you don't always get the big battles that you want. Now, if we have a look at this train, you can actually destroy parts of it. So that is what the carriage looks destroyed, and what I'll do is, when we get over there, I'm going to wait until it gets that little pasture over there, and then we should be able to actually land it. So when it comes to these carriages, if you destroy a few of them, the train will keep moving. It does count as a target destroyed, so this thing is actually, in the game, it does class itself as a unit to be destroyed. So there's definitely some coding going in here for trains, which sounds and feels fun. There we go. Very similar to the Advance to the Rhine map that we also have. So there we go. It's in the pasture now. We've destroyed 3 train carts. Let's see how many you have to destroy to stop this thing from moving. So if we go, that's 4 and 5. So 4 means that this train actually stops itself. And you can see that the train is not exactly what you would call on the ground. But as I said, this represents a bunch of new ideas that we could get in Air Realistic. And what is a better test arena for these ideas, apart from the test drive itself? Now, if this train has been here for ages, and I've just been a nonce and not seen it at all, fair enough. But for me, this is a new, at least not scenario, but it's a new little feature that I've personally never seen before. And that is interesting. Something that over the years in War Thunder, a lot of people have been looking forward. Whoa, okay. A lot of people have been looking forward to stuff such as new aircraft, new vehicles, rank 6, different ways, helicopters and things like this. For me personally, what I've been looking forward to the most is new mechanics. Now, whether this is in the form of 80 gems, whether this is in the form of smoke, whether this is in the form of shroud music, the grief bombs, the as I said, 80 gems, the bullpups, anything like this. This is what interests me about War Thunder. This is what keeps me wanting to play more, because I want to see what they add. I want to see them add some kind of competent radar. I would like to see vehicles which are not just one-on-one dogfighters or massive bombers get some kind of leg up in a certain way. That's why I'm so passionate about mechanics like scouting. And for me, this is another mechanic which interests me. It's a mechanic which has a lot to it. It's the fact that you could make it so you have trains going all over the map all the time in Air Realistic. If you take one out, maybe it stops the line. Maybe you could put them between bases. If a base is destroyed and the train gets there, it actually, reforms the base, something like that. I always thought that would be kind of interesting. Or maybe it's transporting troops, so you can, if it gets to a base, just give the base a little bit more health. What if you have a scenario where you can send a train from an airfield to another airfield to set it up, to make it so it is able to actually create a new airfield? What about something like that? What about supplies? What about things like this? But anyway, this is what the train looks like destroyed. This is what it looks like when it's not destroyed, and it actually looks really nice. And on closer inspection, the wheels are not exactly what we would call spherical. They look much more hexagonal. And then we get to the front bit. Now remember, this is on max graphics, and this is why I say this idea has obviously not been fully fleshed out yet. Hey up. The reason, obviously, why this hasn't been fleshed out yet properly is because the model of the train is not exactly what we would call high quality. Very much like the Yamato that you have in the user missions. It's an interesting thing, but it isn't fully fleshed out. But does this represent something that we may get in the future? I really hope so. I do, and I thought it would be also interesting just to show you it here. If you want to check it out, just get into a lower tier Soviet plane, go for a test drive, and it will be right there on your left hand side. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.